Thank you, Doc. Good morning, everybody. It's great to virtually see all of you. I am Chuck Baker. I'm president of the ASL-RRA, the Short Line Railroad Association, and I'm here this morning to welcome you, to thank you, which Doc just did, but I'm gonna repeat that. I'm gonna give a state of the association update. I'm gonna preview the conference, what you have in store over the next 5 days, and then I'm gonna turn it over to my colleague Joe to introduce our first speaker. Before I start that, I should note my haircut. Yes, this is my COVID cut. For anybody who hasn't seen me on Zoom since the pandemic started, it may come as a bit of a surprise. Yes, I love it. No, I'm never going back. So I'm going to start by thanking all of you. I want to thank you for what you're doing for the country in such a strange year. We're almost 7 months into this historic pandemic, and the world has changed in many ways, but much of what makes our industry great has remained consistent. Our industry has shown up. We are the very definition of a critical industry and a critical workforce. Despite the uncertainty in your personal lives, you and your colleagues came to work and you delivered for your customers, your communities, and our country. And you've done that safely, day in and day out, no matter the pressures. There have been huge challenges, to be sure. A large portion of our workforce is still working remotely. Train crews and maintenance workers are experiencing the inefficiencies created by social distancing. And many of our members' companies have employees who have either tested positive at some point for COVID or had to spend some time in self-quarantine. So it's hardly business as usual, but your service continues largely uninterrupted, as it has through prior national crises, from world wars to natural disasters and now through a global pandemic. One of the things this crisis has highlighted is the role short lines play in the movement of products important to fighting the virus. It turns out that a meaningful percentage of short line traffic is related to medical or cleaning products. For example, dozens of short lines ship large volumes of plastic resin used in making masks and various chemicals used for hand sanitizer and cleaners. Hundreds of short lines carry the raw materials needed to produce consumer-grade paper goods, such as toilet paper and paper towels, products that you may have noticed were in particularly high demand this year. On the ASL-RRA website, we have a special coronavirus page where we are continually cataloging the examples of individual short lines engaged in this service and describing the flexibility that they are exhibiting in responding to ever-changing shipper needs. If you have similar stories, please reach out to us so that we can put your service on public display. As an association, during the pandemic, we have worked to clear obstacles so that you can continue to serve your customers. Early on, that involved working with the FRA on emergency regulatory waivers and with DHS on ensuring that your workers were cleared to access the critical infrastructure that you own and operate. Throughout the year, our safety, regulatory, and legal team members of Joe Strang, J.R. Gellner, Crystal Gitchell, and Sarah Urasco have worked tirelessly on behalf of our members, intervening in issues large and small. On the legislative front, it may seem like a distant memory now that congressional work has ground to an unproductive halt. But earlier this year, the legislative responses to the pandemic were coming fast and furious. In those bills, we ensured that RRB administered policies such as unemployment insurance mirrored those of the non-railroad workforce, that new policies such as the payroll tax credit for sick leave applied to railroads in the same way that they applied to other employers, that short lines were included in major new programs like PPP and EIDL loans, and that in general, our members were up to speed on accessing any relief made available. We held multiple webinars on these topics and created an entire section of our website dedicated to all things COVID. It's still there. Our legislative team, staffed by Tom Lynch, Mara Stark-Alcala, and Crystal Gitchell, have continued to represent us at every opportunity, transitioning from in-person events to Zoom calls to ensure Congress understands the benefits of short-line freight railroads, including our economic and jobs impact, our environmental benefits, safety improvements, congestion reduction, and the road maintenance relief that we provide. You'll hear more about our legislative issues tomorrow during the general session, when we have 2 panels of high-level congressional staffers. And of course, many of you are members of the Legislative Policy Committee and actively participate in making all of this happen. But I'll hit a couple of legislative highlights briefly. Early this summer, the House passed a reauthorization of the Surface Transportation Program, and then combined it with other infrastructure programs into a giant $1.5 trillion, that's trillion with a T, $1 trillion infrastructure package. While there was some good in the bill for short lines, including increased funding for CRISI, a new authorization of funding for the Short Line Safety Institute, increased modal flexibility for a state freight formula program, and no meaningful provisions increasing truck size and weight, unfortunately, there was more bad than good in the package for short lines. Most prominently, the bill included an unnecessary and entirely unjustified two-person crew mandate. It also would have established a 10-minute limit for block crossings, which is not a realistic solution to that challenging issue. And in general, there was an across-the-board effort to focus funding opportunities and eligibilities for rail on passenger instead of freight. The temporary good news for us, however, is that this legislation was passed on a straight party line vote, and thus it's not going anywhere at the moment. So we will get a few more bites at the apple to improve this bill before it becomes law, which will be sometime late next year, we think. I will say, though, that it is going to be crucial for us as an industry, and that means everybody, to reach out to everybody putting this bill together, both sides of the aisle, both sides of the Capitol, and to the administration, whoever that may be, to really make sure that they understand the benefits that short lines can provide for the country and that they enact policies that help rather than hinder our efforts. More recently, the House also passed a transportation appropriations bill, and there was more for us to like in that bill. There were healthy funding levels for CRISI, support for the Short Line Safety Institute, again, no problematic truck size and weight provisions, and as opposed to the Surface Transportation Bill, also no poison pill policy riders. And this effort was at least a little bit bipartisan, so it's probably closer to what will eventually become law. We'll see whether that can get done later this year in a lame duck session in December, or whether it will also get kicked over until 2021. I could certainly never give a rail policy update without a 45G tax credit update. In short, as I'm sure most of you know very well, the credit is currently in place through the end of 2022, blessedly, and short lines are putting it to work successfully every day. Getting that credit further extended, or better yet, made permanent, remains our number one priority. We'll look for an opportunity to do that late this year, but if not, then we'll be back at it again next year with a new Congress. On the PTC front, it's been pretty quiet for a while, but it's also worth noting that the final PTC deadline of December 31st, 2020 is fast approaching. In general, we feel good, but we are on high alert for last-minute testing and implementation problems. And I would also note that some of our folks are having trouble with some insurance requirements for MeteorCom. Ironically, sorry, just checking my text here to make sure nobody's telling me about what I'm supposed to be saying. No, I'm good. Some of our folks are having trouble with some insurance requirements for MeteorCom. Ironically, short lines are being hit with much higher insurance requirements after putting in a system that will make them safer. We are working on a solution at the association that would involve forming a risk purchasing group and essentially pooling some short lines together to purchase specialized insurance coverage aimed just at this PTC-related exposure. And that would potentially allow short lines to purchase the insurance needed at dramatically cheaper rates than you could likely find on your own. We will update on that as soon as possible, hopefully within a few weeks. We know timing is very tight for folks. On the legal front, I wanted to share some good news. I wanted to note the crew-size legal victory in the state of Illinois last week. The U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Illinois, Eastern Division, ruled, just as we had argued, along with Indiana Railroad and the AAR, that Illinois' state crew size mandate is in fact preempted by the FRA's crew size ruling. A separate case is pending in the Ninth Circuit assessing the FRA withdrawal itself, but this is a tremendous step. As the Surface Transportation Board, I could say it's certainly gotten pretty active over there since our friends Patrick Fuchs and Marty Oberman joined the board back at the beginning of last year in 2019. There have been important hearings, decisions, and policies announced regarding demurrage, cost of capital, revenue adequacy, arbitration, Clean Water Act issues, and others too. In general, it's fair to say that short lines are focused on providing great service to our customers and having the kind of frequent, positive, helpful conversations with those customers that result in us not having disputes with them that end up at the STB at all. But nonetheless, we'll of course continue to engage with the key folks at the STB whenever necessary. Patrick, in fact, is providing our final keynote address this week on Friday at 12:30 Eastern, and I urge you to check that out. I promise you will be impressed. I would also note that this year is the 40th anniversary of the Staggers Act, which kicked off the modern era of freight railroading and largely led to the creation of the modern short line industry. Lord knows nothing is perfect, and certainly not the railroad industry or the short line railroads themselves. But we do think overall, big picture, Staggers has been a remarkable success, and it's certainly an anniversary and a legacy worth celebrating. CRISI grants. I mentioned the CRISI program earlier as a policy priority for the industry. I should also note that the latest round of CRISI grants were released just 2 weeks ago. Of the total awards of just over $300 million, there were about 25 different projects that relate to short lines, in total providing about $150 million investment into the industry. That's a pretty nice shot in the arm for the short lines. These were mostly traditional short line track infrastructure, rehab, and upgrade projects all over the country, from Maine to Washington to Alaska, Texas, Virginia, Iowa, Idaho, Kansas, Oklahoma. And these types of projects are the bread and butter of the CRISI program. But I did also want to call special attention to two of the more unusual CRISI grants. One was the $8 million award for the Rail Pulse project, which will help advance a pilot program on railcar tracking with GPS and railcar telemetry. As an industry, we know we need to do better with tracking our customer stuff and giving shippers accurate ETAs for their loads and empties, and generally just being easier to work with. This project involves short lines, Class 1s, shippers, and railcar lessors all working together, which is what it's going to take to get this right. It's very promising, and I believe the participants will have more to say publicly about this in a few weeks. Another interesting award was the $5.4 million award for the Iowa Northern's Education and Training Project, which all ASLRA members will be able to benefit from. ASLRA itself, the Your Association, will be the major contractor to Iowa Northern for this program. Over time, 30 different safety and training courses will be created, and the training will be delivered both virtually and face-to-face in Waterloo. Part of the program will even include locomotive simulator training, which is very cool. Another program we've launched to help our members is the Coalition Health Plan program in partnership with Hub International. It essentially aims to group employees together to leverage increased buying power and reduce the risk and thus the cost of healthcare, while still leaving every employer with their own simple healthcare plan. Small businesses all over the country continually find healthcare costs to be a huge challenge, and short lines are no different in that respect. So this is our attempt as an association to help out on that front. If you're interested, check it out on our website or reach out to any of your contacts on the association staff, and we'll get you pointed in the right direction. At the association, much of our work is done through various committees: engineering, mechanical, safety and training, the aforementioned LPC, F&A, HR, legal, et cetera, et cetera. But I did particularly want to highlight our newest committee because I think it's a crucial topic. That's the Environmental Committee. The committee is staffed by Joe Strang, who will be coming on right after me, and chaired by Sean Strong of Watco. And there are already a couple of dozen members of the committee, and they are absolutely brimming with good ideas. Whether it's sharing best practices among railroads on becoming ever more sustainable, tracking federal and state environmental funding opportunities for such opportunities as cleaner locomotives, sharing fire suppression tactics, or helping to make sure shippers understand the environmental benefits that can come from shipping by rail, I think this topic is going to be a major factor in our industry going forward. Finally, before I transition to an introduction of the conference, I did want to comment on what I see and hear regarding business levels for short lines. Sorry, I'm going to check my text again and just make sure that there's nothing I'm supposed to be saying that I'm not. I think I'm good. All right, so on the comments of business levels for short lines, in the understatement of the century, I'd say it's mixed, of course. Some are up, some are down. It depends on the commodity and customer mix, of course. If you're moving paper, grain, or chemicals, business is probably pretty good right now. If you're moving frac sand or ethanol, it's not so good. If you're moving auto parts or materials for cars and trucks, it probably was bad and now it's good. But I really think more importantly than that, more importantly than the tick-tock of what commodities and what business lines are up or down, for short lines, it's really always about hustling for what's next. It's one carload, one customer at a time, one more transload opportunity, one more % of share of the customer's business. That's how short lines have been winning for 40 years, and that's how we're going to continue to win going forward. moving over to the conference preview. A little bit of this is similar to what Doc said, but I do want to run through this to get people familiar with the conference before we get into our speakers here. We have a fantastic conference coming up. In the next 5 days, there are more than 130 different speakers and moderators between the general sessions and the breakout sessions. There are more than 60 sponsors and also more than 60 different exhibitors. Over 500 of you will be listening live this week, and we expect hundreds more to be listening to recordings of various sessions over the next few months. This is unquestionably the strongest content lineup we've ever had, perhaps a silver lining of the pandemic, as it's easier to get people to commit to 20 minutes on Zoom than to fly across the country. And we have more time for these sessions as we lose all the time we would normally get to spend out at dinners and golf courses and in hallways and exhibit halls and things like that. Beyond the content of the conference, there are some other fun options for you to check out during the conference. I hope you're getting familiar with the website, play around with it at your leisure. When you're on it, a few things to note. One, note the sponsors tab. Without them, simply put, this conference could not exist. You'll hear me and other speakers thanking them a lot this week, and they deserve it. Also note the exhibits tab. Please check those virtual booths out, reach out to those companies, support those companies. Those exhibitors, those are the folks that stuck with us in a virtual conference, so let's stick with them in return. Let's do business with those companies. Brain breaks. This is a really fun feature. Whenever you need a break from whatever you're doing, the conference or anything else, check out the Brain Breaks tab. There are a bunch of fun little videos. There's a great one of the pets of the Young Professionals Committee. I took a look last night. There are a bunch of cute dogs on there, some creepy cats. It's a lot of fun. There's a fantastic photo montage on there of locomotives of ASLRA board member companies. I think you'll really enjoy that. I found that very inspiring. There's even a live shot of the fish swimming around at the National Aquarium in Baltimore. It's one of the finest aquariums in the world. I only partially say that because I'm born and raised in Baltimore, but you'll really enjoy that. Anytime you need to chill out, just look at the fish. There's a virtual photo booth. This is really fun. You can go on there, click the photo booth, use your phone or laptop or whatever to take a photo of yourself. The booth will let you add some fun background and additions with short line logos, thumbs up, emojis, that sort of thing. Then you can post it on social media. You can use the hashtag ASLRRA2020, show the world that you're doing something useful today. You can also check out the gallery of all the other fun ones that have already been taken. Happy hours. We're doing virtual happy hours, both Monday, that's today, and also Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern. If you check out that tab, there are cocktail videos on there from Stefan Loeb, Michelle Malsky, Shay McLaughlin, and me. All three of their videos are remarkably high-end quality. They're making Mai Tais, doing wine tasting. There's a Malsky Mule, fancy dirty martini, a delicious-looking Bloody Mary. Mine is less high quality. I didn't know that I was competing against professional bartenders, but it is what it is. But before 5 p.m., take a look at those videos, grab a drink. Non-alcoholic is perfectly fine too. We want everyone to be safe. Join the happy hour tab. Click in, and what we're going to do is we're going to randomly shuffle you around into small groups of 8 or so people into small Zoom rooms, and it's our attempt to sort of capture some of the serendipity that happens at an in-person event. And then finally, there's a tab that has an attendee list with all of the attendees of the conference with their names, emails, and phone numbers. That's a big part of what the conference is all about, connecting with each other. So we try to make it as easy as possible. And then finally, I want to thank the team that put this conference together. It's less travel for the conference and it's less revenue to the association, unfortunately, but it is most certainly not less work to put a virtual conference together. Kathy Keeney, Amy Westerman, Sabrina Weiss, Amy Krause, Danielle Richardson, Camille Campbell, they have spent a lot of time and effort to make this event as useful as possible for our members, while of course doing all of their other daily work to run the association with me and the rest of the team. There are technical challenges to putting this on. There are time crunches. There are unexpected pivots. We stuck with it and we made it work, and we felt just like our railroads do. This is what short lines do every day. You deal with it and you make it work, and that's what we did too. And so we hope you all enjoy the benefit of it. As I wrap up now, I again want to thank all of you for listening and participating this whole week. I want to thank the sponsors and exhibitors for making this conference possible. And finally, if you like what you're seeing, pass it on to your colleagues. It is most certainly not too late to sign up. They can go onto our normal Shortline Association website, sign up, and we will get them logged on and good to go almost immediately. So with that is your State of the Association update and your conference preview. I'm now going to turn it over to our Senior Vice President of Safety and Regulatory Policy, Joe Strang. And Joe will introduce our first keynote speaker, FRA Administrator Ron Batori. Joe.